Hello, and there we'll look at the worksheet exercises. So you might find that some of the exercises require you to introduce a combination of the different items that we have learned throughout the week, especially when it comes to functions. So with our DF functions, right? You might find that you might have to incorporate the control flows, or you might have to incorporate the loops, the for loops, the while loops. So the control flows is where we have our if else statements, right? Yes, so you might have to incorporate that. So let me just remove that. So I will look at one question that we can use an example as an example. So you might be required to create a function and that takes lists, numbers, and calculates, let's say it calculates what? The average. The average. Right. So over here I'm just going to give you clues on how you're going to work it out, but then something that I want you guys to try out first before we get into the answers. But then here are the clues that I will give to you, right? Let me just move this a bit. Right. So the first thing that we know that we're going to be working on a function, right? We are specifically told here that we're supposed to create a function, right? And then we're told that it takes a list of numbers, right? Then what also does is, so here we're introducing lists. That's what we're thinking about right now, right? When we do this thing, it takes a list. So there's an introduction of lists, right? Then there is a calculation that has to be done, and it's what is calculating average, right? So we already know, so let me number this. We say this is 1, and then this is 2, and then this is 3. Then let's look at 1, right? For 1 functions, we know that we know this from the video tutorial, right? We know we have def, we define a function, and the function can give it any name that we want, right? So for this, we're just going to say av list. And this is the name that I want, right? We know that we're going to have to introduce this, and we have to define a function there. Then our function over there. So this is what we already have. Then 2, we are told that it will have to take a list, right? So there's supposed to be a list of numbers. So any list of numbers maybe 3. So any list, right? So it might be a list, could be any list. So yeah, let's just write any list. So it's not just this list, right, that we want it to take. We want it to take any list. And from this, that means that with our function, we can do that. We just have to give a list here. So it has to take in a list, right? It takes in a list in there. You can name it. So let me name it properly there. So that, all right, so it has to take in a list in here. A list. Sorry. So let's take a list in there. Then we go to 3. Oh, I'm messing up the color coding, but that's fine. Then we look at average, right? How is average calculated? Average, how do we calculate our average, right? So this is something we have to look at. Average. The average is equal to the sum of numbers. Sum of numbers over the number of numbers. Since we are going to be taking in a list, we want our function. Now, function wanted to be able to go in our list. So we have our list there with our numbers. Let's just say our list is 4 numbers for now. So we wanted to to go through each and every number in that list, right? So that we can be able to add those numbers, right? So that we can be able to add those numbers, as well as then divide them by the number of numbers. So from here, we can already tell that we have 4 numbers there. So this one won't be hard for us, right? Then I think the total over there is 24, right? 9 plus 7, 16, 16 plus 8, 4, I think it's 24. If it's not, you can always correct that. Then, so this we know this, but then we want this to be done by the function itself, and it should work no matter what list we give it. It should be able to do the same thing, right? So how do we get the sum of numbers, right? So we can use a for loop. So here we can introduce let me just check if I have the right color code there. So we can so let me use black. So introduce, we have to introduce a for loop. Here we can introduce something else. I am going for loop. You can try with something else as well. For loop there, right? So we want our for loop to go through this list, right? And as it retrieves each and every number, we have to add these numbers together, right? So that means I might end up having to create a variable called sum, right? And then sum initially have to be equal to 0. But then as I add those numbers to it, it will increase. I'll add 3 to it, I'll add 6, 7, 8, using that for loop, right? So initialize, we can initialize. So init, this is initializing, right? We might initialize it like so, right? By saying sum is equal to this and that. And then this will give us, right, the sum. And then to get how many numbers are in a list, right? So that we know how many numbers are in the list. So I will create, let's say, num of num here. How sum, we start, so over here we're going to start with 0, then we're going to say plus 3 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8. This is how it will work. Then with the num of numbers, right? If you remember, there's something that I talked about pertaining to this called length. If you remember, right, we can find the number of numbers using that. We can find length using that. We can use length here, the LE and the len for length, right? Or you can introduce a count. So that after every for loop that it goes through, right, you can have a count being incremented by 1 every time, like in the while loop. You can do that, or you can even use a while loop instead of a for loop, right? Those are just different. I'm just giving out ideas here, right? So this is what it might do. And then after it has done this, another variable here, which we'll call average num there. We might have it like that, and then we have to then say sum, this variable sum, then we divide it by num of num. And don't forget that all of this is being done in a function. It has to be in a function. So let me just try to demonstrate it a bit better down there. Okay, let's give it a better name. I think that one, calculate, let's give it a better name, average. Then it takes in a list, like what we said there. It's going to take in a list over there, right? Then sum, like what I mentioned, right? Sum is we're going to initialize sum. We're going to have sum as 0, and we're going to have count. If you want to use count, you're going to have count as 0 over there. Then we're going to introduce our for loop, right? So it's going to be for num, for number, for I, or whatever you want to put there, for n in list. Okay, I left the for syntax there, wasn't complete there. I think list, we can have that for num in list. And then what it's going to do is going to say sum. Right, for every, so it's going to go through our list, right? And as it goes through the list, it's going to add that number to sum. Sum is initially 0, so as we add, right? Then let me just okay, I'll zoom out a bit later. Let me just finish this part, right? So sum is equal to sum for the num. Sum is equal to sum plus num. Or we can do it the way that we talked about, the shorter way. Sum plus equal num. So this just means that we're adding num to sum, right? Then count, our count, we're also going to introduce a count, like what we did in while loops. Our count will count for us. So after every iteration for num, after the first iteration, it will add 1 to count, right? This is this, right? It's going to do that. Then we are going to introduce, not introduce, but when we do have our functions, when we're not printing, right, we can return for what we want to print. We can close up our function with a return statement. Then after we have done everything in this section, what do we want? We want it to return to give back to us the average, right? So we can use a return statement there. A return, what is it returning? It's going to return the sum divided by the count. Divided by the count, right? Or you can create another variable. You can create a variable average. The over your average will be, so let me just do that as well. I think that will be better for us. So we can also have AVG is equal to 0. Then after the for loop, we can have AVG is equal to AVGN. AVGN is equal to sum divided by count over there. And then we can come in and say return AVGN over there, right? Or we can just say print. We can have a print statement there. So you don't have to go this route. But with return, you can always introduce the print statement later, right? So with return, right? Return doesn't do what print does, right? Like print, then it's not the equivalent to print. So the return is giving us back that value, right? But then when we want to display it, we have to print. So after it has returned the value, right, it will then we then still have to introduce a print statement somewhere else. So we can always we can come in and say and then we come in and say print and AVGN there. You can come in, right? Do go and check out what the differences are where you write the print or where you have it. We can do it like that, right? Then we have our numbers, print average, and then we have, so this will then be our function, right? So how do we calculate our array? And you cannot say try to put in the indentation as they look in the notebook. So this is what we have. So how do you then call the function? You come in and then you say, so let me just do this, and then you come in and then you're now saying, oh, you have a list, you have your list here. Let's say you have a list A there, then it's equal to the numbers that you have, 3, 6, 7, 8, right? This is the list that you have. Then you now want to come in and call our function. Our function, we named it calculate average. So you can come under there and then say calculate average then average. So the function it has, oh, so it's not average like that, it's AVG. Okay, AVG there. Then we have to call it with a list. So we have list A, the one that we named list A there. List A there. And then there you have it. We have called our function. So you can write it like this, like I said, or you can come if we have the return statement in there. Let me show you. Which I think is actually the proper way. We can search about it and see what's the advice thing over here. But either way, okay, let me finish this one up. So average there, and then we can say return AVGN. And then, so if we do it like this now, when we say calculate average product, it will return something, but it won't show it to us. So that means over here we have to have a print statement. So these ones, we can put them in an outer bracket and have print and print there. Let me just highlight it here. This has to be, oh, I think I found it. Oh, okay. I think I found it. Okay. Oh, yes. Yes. There we have it there. As you can see, so print has to look like this, right? Then let me actually fix something again so that we don't have the indentations wrong, right? So that you're not confused about where am I supposed to indent and all that, right? So we have that. So it's like this is our margin, right? Exactly. So we have these things indented in ones inside our function. We have what's supposed to be indented, where it's supposed to be indented, so that you just know how it's supposed to look. So this is what we have for the how to to create this function. So it's more on the math side, trying to figure out, do I need variables to consider this, trying to make all those considerations, right? So there's another thing that we have to think about, right? Let's say we have list A, we can have different type of lists, right? So what if someone puts in an empty list, right? Let's say the list that they have inserted here is empty. So let's actually edit that there. So we want to see an scenario where if a person calls the function with an empty list, should tell us that the list is empty, right? So let's say if list is empty, let me just choose the correct pen. Okay, wrong color. If list is empty, it should say so, right? So this is like you thinking as a programmer and all that, trying to think of all the possible things that could happen, because if you want to get a result, but you won't get a result there. Here actually but there is a problem, right? If there's nothing in the list, you get that error will be count will be 0. So and the sum will be 0 divided by 0. You get that error so if list A should say so, you get, so that we don't want that 0 over 0 error, right? So this is something that we don't want. So how do we do this? That means that after you have done this 4 number in list segment, right, you have to introduce a for loop. So let me try to select our segments and introduce what I want to introduce there. So sum count, right? So that we can have that there, right? And then let me write something there. So over here we have count. Then it has after it finishes doing this, right, we can introduce an if loop where we say if count, we just check the count. If count is equal to, so we have double equal signs there, is equal to 0, then what happens? We can return list is empty. Here we can return list is empty, right? Else what? We know that if count is equal to this, it will return list, or else return we wanted to return return. We return let's go back and cut this. We can have this segment, right? So let me cut it up for us. Then we can move this. I didn't have it like that. Why we chose count is the one that we're going to check. We check the numbers that we added, right? So you might have 5 numbers, it'll always check that. But then with some you can have a sum that's 0, right? Even when the numbers in the list are more than 0. How? Because you might have a list that has a -5, a +5, a -3, a +3, or something like that, where we have the total adding up to 0, but we know that there are how many numbers there are 4. So when we have this 0 divided by 4 in our code, we want to get that error, right? The error that shows us that 0 and 0 cannot be divided to one another. So those are things that you can think of as well when you're working it out. So do not be intimidated when a bunch of things are put together.